Hi, I'm Asif Farouk of Finextra and I'm joined by Richard Chapman of SunGard. Thanks for joining us. So, firstly, can you just tell us about a few of the changes that are currently happening in the reconciliation space?
Sure, I think there's a number of changes that are making the reconciliation space quite an exciting place to be at the moment. The first thing is changes around regulation and internal compliance. The second are changes around transparency and risk escalation, if you like. And the third is around cost management or cost control. So looking at each of those, regulation and internal compliance is having quite an impact on the reconciliation landscape by expanding the scope of reconciliation services and reconciliation automation beyond traditional types of reconciliation like cash and securities into interesting fields like derivatives, collateral, internal system-to-system reconciliation, real-time reconciliation, and so forth. So the first implication of that is there's an expansion of scope. There's a wider diversity of reconciliations being automated within an organisation. The second component around transparency and risk escalation is that I think there's a broader set of stakeholders in the reconciliation process. So there's a wider audience that are receiving output from the reconciliation processes. And that means a greater need for real-time information, for consolidation, aggregation and distribution of the output of reconciliations to that audience. The third element around cost management or cost control, of course, is pushing deeper and deeper automation and driving further and further automation and workflow to lower the operational costs associated with the process by eliminating manual activity. All of those three things are building a sort of pressure cooker that will push an organisation into the construction of a centre of excellence or what we would term a reconciliation service to deliver reconciliation centrally to the organisation.
What do you think some of the challenges are that financial institutions are facing right now?
I think as they build out their reconciliation service centres, their centres of excellence, they're really faced with three major challenges. The first is fragmentation of the reconciliation landscape. The second is service quality and the maintenance or the increase in service quality. And the third is cost management, so the reduction in operational costs. So looking at each of those three things in turn, fragmentation is particularly important because it's really this explosion in the types of reconciliation that a service now covers that is causing an operating environment that typically covers multiple regions with multiple reconciliation software solutions, many of them bespoke or custom build, many of them with multiple versions of the same product on differing infrastructure or supporting platforms. That is extremely difficult to manage. It's difficult to manage from a clarity perspective, so truly understanding what's happening at any point in time. It's very difficult to manage from a transparency standpoint, from a standardization standpoint, so making sure that everything runs in a similar fashion so that you can report on it. And finally, it's very difficult to manage from a maintenance perspective. So how would you upgrade all of these different versions of different software across a globally distributed landscape? The second component around service quality, I suppose, is a fallout from that fragmented environment. If you're living in that environment, how can you guarantee service delivery quality? Also, where is that quality determined? Is it determined by the service provider in terms of a series of technical checklists that need to be executed? Or is it defined by the business consumer of the reconciliation service according to the outcome from a business perspective that they're expecting to see, and where's that held and how is it measured? And I think the final aspect around cost management, of course, is that the purpose of a reconciliation service is to drive down operational costs, or one of the purposes. So how are we measuring that, and how do we ensure that our operational costs continue to be minimal whilst at the same time providing the scalability that's required to grow a reconciliation service, the flexibility that's required in order that that service can cover any operational process, regardless of how complex that may be, and how do we continue to provide the transparency across the service whilst maintaining those low operational costs.
So what do you see as the recommended best practice or best approach?
I think there are really three core fundamental building blocks that a reconciliation service needs to address in order for it to really transform the way it delivers reconciliations out to the businesses it serves. One is that it has an ability to catalogue the entire inventory of reconciliations and the expected and mandatory behaviour of those for the landscape. Two is the ability to monitor in real time the execution of activities against that inventory and against expected and mandatory behaviour in order to, three, respond. So in other words, to be able to react to irregular or unexpected activities that are occurring inside the reconciliation process before it becomes a service level breach or before it has a serious impact in operational efficiency. So looking in more detail at those three aspects, if we start with the reconciliation inventory, what an organisation will need to do is construct a comprehensive list of reconciliations that are covered by the service and that span the landscape, and then seek to address the expected outcomes of all of those activities associated with the recons and agree the SLAs that will determine the success or failure of the service to the line of business. And those SLAs should be at a business level, not just a technical level. The second aspect then of monitoring the reconciliation landscape would be to track the execution of all the individual tasks that constitute the overall reconciliation landscape against the inventory. So ensuring that one, they run, two, they run within expected guidelines, and three, that if they haven't run within expected guidelines, that the service owners capitalise on the window between the expected outcome and the mandatory SLA to resolve any issues. And the third thing then is that they add as much automation and workflow into that response to enable that window to be capitalised upon. If they can do those three things, then they will have transformed the way that they deliver reconciliation services out to their business.